Record. All right. Good morning, everybody online. Good morning, everybody in person. We learned Leilu Nishmat Avigdor Chai Avram Ben Rachaleh Mer Tzvi, and we are in the middle of, depending on your printing, the middle of or the beginning of a Mishnah. It's chapter 4, and it may be number 11, 12, 13. It starts with Rabbi Yochanan Hasandlar. Okay. It's number 14 by you. Okay. By me, it's middle of 11. It's a combination of two Mishnah together, the way that Rav Kahati has it set up. I'll read his lines, what he said, and then go back to the questions we left off with last week. Rabbi Yochanan Sandlar Omer, Kol Knessia she'eh l'shem Shemaim, every gathering, I'm going to come back to that word Knessia in a moment, every gathering that is for the sake of heaven, we'll also have to understand what does that mean. Sofa lehitkayem, will come to reach its goals. It'll come to a resolution, to a conclusion. There's all different ways to translate that. V'she'eina l'shem Shemayim, but a gathering that is not l'shem Shemayim, not for the sake of heaven. Ein sof lehitkayem. It's not going to come to a resolution. It's not going to come to a good ending, however you want to translate it. So I want to just go to a word here first, which is an important word to know, which I think I touched on briefly last week. The word knessia, translated probably in English as gathering. In modern Hebrew, the word knessia means church. This shoresh is kaf nun samach, which means kenes. A kenes is a gathering, a conference where people gather together. Lachnis to enter, likanes to enter, lachnis to put something inside. The Knesset, where the leaders of the country gather together, it's all the same word. And what we left off with was we have to define certain things. We have to first define or understand who was Rabbi Yochanan HaSandlar. It's kind of a strange word because Sandlar means a shoemaker. So who was he? We'll talk about that. And what is the definition of, when I say a gathering that's the Shem Shammai? What does that even mean? So first let's talk about Rabbi Yochanan HaSandlar. So first of all, just who he was as far as time period. He was one of the last students of Rabbi Akiva. We're talking about fourth generation of the Tanaim. So I can't give an exact year, but let's say approximately year 300. That makes sense. It should. His nickname, Rabbi Yochanan HaSandlar, the shoemaker. There are two possibilities how he had that name. One is it's in line with many other people we see in the Gemara. We see people known as Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha was a napach. He was a blacksmith. He had a job. He wasn't just sitting and learning in the Beit Midrash and working as a rabbi, but he also had a job as a blacksmith. We have many people we see within the Mishnah and in Gemara. Those are two different time periods, one after the other, where they are identified by a trade. Now, you know that until the Middle Ages, there were really no family names for the most part, in most countries. It's only when they started to have like David. Oh, which David are you talking about? Like, George Foreman, the boxer, all his kids, I think 6, 7 sons are all named George. I guess it made it easier to have to remember which, we all forget our kids and neighbors' name. George, which George? No, that George. But it was actually done by, they said, okay, these X amount of people green, they were after colors, they were after names, sometimes they were after professions. For example, the Hyatt hotels? Hyatt is from the word chayat. It's a Schneider, which is a tailor. That's the history behind the family name. So there's all kinds of cool things, which we're going to talk about Jewish history. But correct. But you see all these so-called Palestinians, they're all from Egypt and from Iran and Iraq. Yeah, they're not. Yeah, none of them are Israeli. Yeah, that's what most of those names actually mean. See, look at that. Yeah. So that's one major possibility, is that he was like these other people at the time who did not sit and learn all day long, but they also went out to earn a living. There were people, and still are a few, who fall into a category of Torato umanuto. His Torah is his job. That's his livelihood, which meant the person who really sits day and night and learns. Nowadays, you have a fewer and far between people like that. We need people like that, of course. But in that time period, there were many of those people. These were giants in knowledge of Torah. Keep in mind also, they weren't that many years after the original giving of the Torah itself. That's one possibility. And there's another one. The Gemara in Yerushalmi tells us that he is, I'll read the sentence, Rabbi Yochanan HaSandlar, Alexandri La'amitohu. He was from Alexandria, Egypt, which fits into what you just said, Steve, that he was from Alexandria. So he was known as the Sandlar from the sound of the Samach Nun Daled Resh, that Sandlar and Alexander. By the way, Alexander became a very common Hebrew name because of Alexander the Great, who was good to the Jews. So we have two possibilities, whatever it is. But who was he? What was he? We always try to see when we talk about someone who has a different kind of name or some individual is very famous, what made him well known? What was important about him? Besides the fact he appears in the Mishnah. None of us appear in the Mishnah. He appears in the Mishnah. So there are a couple of stories that tell us a little bit about him. He was, as I said, he was the last disciple or student of Rabbi Akiva. And there was a period of time where Rabbi Akiva was imprisoned. And while he was in prison, there was a certain halachic decision that needed to be made. And there was a big dispute among his students as to what the rule is. Rabbi Yochanan Sandlar came up with a great idea. He couldn't go to, because one of the reasons Rabbi Akiva was in prison, because he was teaching Torah. So you can't go to the prison and ask, hey, I need to talk to him, and I got a shiloh for him. It ain't gonna work. So he did was he went to the prison and he starts making small talk. And in the small talk, the Rabbi Yochanan Sandlar, he weaves in things about threads and needles, and it became very quickly apparent to Rabbi Akiva that he wasn't talking about threads and needles. He was using it as an example. I think it had to do with Tumantara, ritual purity and impurity. And the Rabbi Akiva caught on. He asked, "Is there a blacksmith in the community?" And it started talking about kashrut. And toch kedei, while this is going on, Rabbi Akiva is asked a question. Rabbi Yochanan Sandlar gets his answer, and he brings it back to his comrades, so to speak, and they're able to make a decision. And this is how he's able to use his intellect, not just in saying, okay, what a halacha is, but to come up with a unique way to be able to find out from his teacher who at that point really couldn't tell him. There's also a story in the, and you'll see then why he says what he says in this mission in a minute. There's also a story in the Gemara, in the Yerushalmi. I don't want to assume anything. I'm going to back up a second. I mentioned Yerushalmi a lot. That's fine. Feel it, make yourself at home, really. Pretend you're at home. That there are two Talmuds. The one that 95% of people learn is the Talmud Bavli, which was from approximately 500 to, it concluded around the year 500, from 200 to 500. And I gave the date for Rabbi Yochanan Sandlar was too late. It was earlier than 200. Because already that's the time period of the Amoraim. And it's mostly in Babylonia, which is modern day Iraq. And the Jerusalem Talmud, even though it was promulgated in Tiberia for the most part up north, out of respect for Jerusalem, it's called the Jerusalem Talmud. Around the same time period was growing. It's very different. I had the zechut of learning Yerushalmi a lot over the last many years, and it's a very different Gemara. But it's a Gemara. It's another Talmud that we have as our history. So the Yerushalmi tells the story that there was a gathering of sages, a gathering of chachamim, and they got into a big fight. All these people, these are 7 students, again, of Rabbi Akiva, and the purpose of their getting together in this particular situation was to do what's called, here's a fancy English word, intercalation of the month, of the year. What is that in normal Hebrew English? To make a leap year. They had to make a decision. Nowadays, we have a calendar that's perpetual, that we know always. I can tell you in 700 years from now, Rosh Chodesh Av, what day of the week it's going to be, what date it's going to be. But back then, they did Kiddush HaChodesh based on Re'iyah, on seeing. So they also had to decide if they're going to add an extra month, an extra Adar, which we will have this coming year, next year, Tafshin Pei Zion. And there was a big dispute. And they brought the dispute to Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Yochanan Sandlar was able to say his opinion. And he said that he had served Rabbi Akiva longer. He knew the halacha better than all of his contemporaries do. He had to stand up for what he believed and said, this is the way Rabbi Akiva taught. This is what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to yes or not make the new month. And actually, some of the other students said, we never even heard him say this particular topic. And they all agree with Rabbi Yochanan Sandlar and said that, yes, he's number one. Absolutely. He understood what Rabbi Akiva said, and we're going to follow him. And they all got up and they embraced each other. It was before this happened, though, there was a severe disagreement between them. You can just say, oh, no, no, I'm right. They're going at it. If you ever seen some people argue, then they really can get into it. If you took an average person who's never walked into a Beit Midrash, where there's 500-600 guys sitting and learning and whatever it is going to be, and you walk in there, you say like they're all angry at each other. What are you talking about, Rabbi? That's the way you kind of get into it. But they were getting into for the actual getting into the argument, arguing for that each one felt that their opinion was right. But what happens at the end? It said that they all got up and they gave each other a kiss and a hug because they understood that it was all done for the right reason. Hence, you see what he says in this Mishnah. Now you can understand why he says, when there's a gathering that's l'shem shamayim, they weren't getting together for their ego. They're getting together to decide what the halacha was in whether or not they could do the following year to make it a leap year. So therefore, he comes with this statement that when there is we have to go into it more, obviously, but when people get together for the purpose of the Shem Shamayim, then in fact, you will come to a resolution. There's a similar idea. There's a Mishnah in Yevamot. It tells us that we know that throughout Mishnah and Gemara, first of all, Shamayim Hillel, and then their students, Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, argue about a lot of stuff. Vast majority of the time, the rule goes like Beit Hillel. You'll also notice, I'm not forget that part, vast majority of the time. It's not just, I think that you can do this or you can't. Some of these were massive halachic differences that make up one. That Beit Shammai said that these two people could not be allowed to be married because whatever halachic reason. And Beit Hillel said they can be married. Okay, so you might think that, okay, not only do they hold their positions, but they wouldn't allow their children, a family of Beit Shammai, to be married to Beit Hillel. They hold different opinions because maybe what they're going to be, this couple is going to marry, and it's prohibited. So it says in the Mishnah, even though these, one group, Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai, said something is prohibited, and the other group said it's okay. Others, or other situations where one said something's kosher, the other says it's not okay. Family of Beit Shammai did not stop from getting married into family of Beit Hillel, and lo Beit Hillel mi Beit Shammai. Same idea. Again, it was their gatherings were always l'shem shamayim. There were always, the whole purpose when they had their disagreements were not to say I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm taking my ball and going home. That's not how it was. There's another Mishnah we learned a long time ago that has a similar connotation, which had to do with the idea of any machloket, any disagreement that l'shem shamayim will come to resolution, and a machloket that is not l'shem shamayim will not come to resolution. The Mishnah gives an example of each. The one for the machloket l'shem shamayim, it's called Lo Shem Shamayim, was Korach and his people. That it was not a machloket l'shem shamayim. So you should say, the Mishnah should have said Korach and Moshe. Korach was challenging Moshe's authority. So it said, that's the machloket. That was a disagreement. It says, no. The machloket of Lo Shem Shamayim was actually Korach and his followers within themselves, because they were fighting themselves about what the proper thing to do and not do. And that was not l'shem shamayim, but Moshe was l'shem shamayim. So what kind of gathering is for the sake of heaven? If I go to the makolet and there are two people standing there and I start talking to them, is that a gathering l'shem shamayim? Is this a gathering l'shem shamayim? Probably, because we're learning Torah. So we have to first, let's kind of figure out what that is. The reason we want to kind of drill down a little bit is to make a statement that it sounds very nice, but maybe in our minds we picture like, okay, only when people sit down and decide a halacha or make a policy of something, that's what Shem Shamayim. Everything else, okay, we do what we're going to do. So there's, we talked about a long time ago in Pirke Avot, there's something called Avot de Rabbi Natan, which is a more expanded version of Pirke Avot. It's many chapters. It's over 40 chapters, as opposed to 6 chapters for Pirke Avot, which originally, if you remember, was 5, then was added a 6th later in history. He says like this, Avot de Rabbi Natan, he gives an example, which sounds very strange. What gathering could we say is a Knesiyah l'shem shamayim? Zo Knesiyat Avotenu Har Sinai. That's when our forefathers got together at Har Sinai to get the Torah. B'sheina l'shem shamayim. What was not l'shem shamayim? Zo Dor HaPalaga. The Dor HaPalaga was the group of people who decided to build a tower, the Tower of Babel. Babel. By the way, that's where you get the word to babble. Like he's just babbling, exactly, is from the Tower of Babel or Babel, because that's what happens is Hashem changed all their languages at that time, right? They couldn't understand each other. So it's kind of strange to say that this is a Knesset. That's where the Avot Rabbi Natan goes to Har Sinai to say that, well, that's the model for it. And Dor HaPalaga, I grew up calling it Dor HaFloga. That's how we would Dor HaFloga. This Dor HaPalaga is the really right way to say it. So what does that mean? What was Har Sinai? It's the initial coming together of Am Yisrael and to receive the Torah. Anything that we do that perpetuates the Torah is a Knesset L'Shem Shamayim. That's what it means. You sit down here to learn Pirke Avot. You walk into the Makol, you see two people, you start talking to them. By the way, don't forget, this week starting today, you can start saying what's called Birkat Ilano, the special bracha for the trees in the month of Nisan. Oh, cool. I didn't know that. And so you start talking. That's Knesset L'Shem Shamayim. It might be 1 minute. It doesn't have to be a whole conference. You get together at some big Astrodome or something. It doesn't have to be that. It's where you get together for the purpose of promulgating, talking about, learning Torah, and anything associated with Torah whatsoever. The other extreme was the Dor HaPalaga. We have to understand, what was it so bad, what they did? So we're going to take another approach for a second of what is a gathering that is L'Shem Shamayim. It's something that is a non-selfish, ego-driven gathering. What does that mean? When people get together to discuss something, let's say we have an issue in the building here. Pretend you're part of this building now, okay? We're going to really pretend you. That's no thanks. We have a Vad Bayit meeting, which I think we've had one of 3 since we moved here. That's good. I mean, that's a good sign too, in a sense. And we sit down, and actually, let's not use our building. Just stop. Some group of people need this community issue they're going to get together and talk about. And I'll give you a great example. Someone just approached me the other day in the community and said, I think I have a good idea. I said to me, we should have a group of people who don't have, let's say, like a lot of kids at home or something, people who have some time, who can check in within the Anglo community and call people to see how you're doing. Just check in, make sure if they need anything. Not that you can send them research, just to get the people who are, especially people who have their husbands or sons or someone in Miluim or daughters who are in the army, kids who are having trouble with school because now it's coming back in drips and drabs. And I said, you know what, that's a great idea. We'll get together. We're going to get together and talk about this later today, probably, I hope. So he and I are going to talk, and maybe one other person. That's a Knesset L'Shem Shamayim, right? But I'm not going there because, oh, look what Zev Shanlov's doing. He's going to try and contact Shtuyot. Okay, I'm not going there for the ego. He's not going for the ego. So when you leave the ego out, and it doesn't necessarily have to be you're learning halacha. It doesn't have to, you're doing something for the greater good. You're doing something for the community. And there's the idea also of achdus, of unity, of gathering together for one singular purpose. When that's the case, I'm going to come back to Dor HaPalaga in a moment. The sofa lehitkayem, this concept, the end will come to a resolution, or it refers to the purpose of getting together. Sometimes people get together and it's miserable. It just happens that there's no participation. Every organization is the same thing. You have, let's say, 10 people in the organization or 1,000 people. There's a certain percentage that always are the worker bees, and they always have the idea, and the other ones are just sitting there sipping coffee and say, yeah, whatever you think is fine. Or they've just decided at the last minute to start throwing everything into chaos, right? It happens in every single organization. But there can be people that you try to get together and say, okay, we want to open a new school. We want to start a new organization. We want whatever it might be, and they're lacking resources, but the Mishne is saying, look, when your purpose is not your ego, when your intention is to do the right thing. In Chicago, many, many years ago, there's a very, I should say unfortunately, there's a small Sephardi community in Chicago. It's grown, but it's not that big. And many years ago, it was even smaller. So there was an idea that did come out that happened to build a Sephardi day school. It lasted, I think, 2 years, 2 or 3 at the most. There wasn't enough. What's the word? Yeah, right. There wasn't enough of a core of people, and there were Ashkenazim going also, which was fine. They weren't like being, we're saying exactly, but it didn't take off, but it did get started, and no one who organized it. I know a couple of people who opened the school. No one said it was a waste of time, because if you didn't try it, you never know. Maybe it would have been an unbelievable success. They tried. It didn't work. Okay, but you tried. Same thing is true here when you're talking about all these different purposes of people might gather together, whether it's I directly have to do with Torah itself or something related. If your intention is for the Shem Shemayim, the sake of heaven, then it's going to succeed. Is it going to be a great success? Not necessarily. You may open the school, it may fail. You may end up doing the project. It may not go where you're hoping it was going to go. So why is it then, and again, I'm not forgetting, we're going to get back to the Dor HaPalaga, that why is it that it does fulfill its goals or come to some form of resolution, as Rabbi Yochanan Sandlar said, when the intention is the Shem Shemayim? First of all, generally speaking, it will happen when people come with no grievances. They're not coming with a chip on their shoulder, which is not necessarily true when you're talking about opening a new shul. Very often a new shul opens up because you got fed up with something in one shul. And then when they open a new shul, there's the word ahava in the next shul for some reason. Like shuls, ahava or breakaway shuls. Anyways, you don't come with personal grievances. For the most part, people have the common goal. Let's say you're going to discuss opening a new school in Ma'ale Adumim, because really there, when you think about it, there's very little option in the religious Orthodox, in the religious community in the Dati Leumi world in Ma'ale Adumim for high school and for day school, for Yisodi. You have two choices pretty much in both those levels, which isn't enough. And so people gather together, they're going to come together for talk about maybe putting together a new school. Now, let's say you have 10 people sitting at the table. One of them is not there saying, you know what, I really think we should have made salmon for that dinner last week. No, they're there because they're coming for a goal, a purpose, right? So there's a common goal. Doesn't mean everyone has the same opinion. It's very different between a goal and an opinion. We could sit here at the table, debate something. We have a goal to set something up, whether it's going to be another class or a building or an organization. That's fine. We have a goal, but your opinion, yours and mine may be very different. But we all work towards a common goal. And no one expects a profit out of it, unless, of course, you're getting together for a business venture. Obviously, it's a different story. But what's the commonality in all this? Unity. The concept of unity of purpose, not unity of opinion. It's a remember, we want unity, not uniformity. Very, very big difference. Matter of fact, Shlomo HaMelech tells us in Kohelet, Tovim Hashanai mina echad. Two are better than one, who have good reward for their labor. Because if one person falls, is meant metaphorically, also physically, but metaphorically. If one person falls and you're two people, the other one can help him up. But if you're by yourself, who's going to help him stand up? Again, metaphorically, you work together. When people work together, there's so much more to be gained from it. So on the one hand, why does it come to a resolution? Because number one, it's the Shem Shemayim. Number two, the people are involved. The people are invested. They have the form of unity. The unity is the huge part of this. And they're there to support each other. But there's another reason. Because unity prevails, there's also a new partner at the table. And that partner is Hashem. The Pasuk says in Zot HaBracha, Vahi Bishurun Melech, Bitasef Rashi Am, Yachad Shiftei Yisrael, which means when will there be the king of Yeshurun, which is another name for Bnei Israel, will come to the gathering of the people, Yachad Shiftei Yisrael, when all the tribes are together. What does that mean? When does Hashem join such a gathering? Again, metaphorically, when the people and the heads of the people are united. When Israel's united, good day. When Israel's united, then it leads to Hashem himself kiviyachol, joining the gathering. And he says that the word knessia itself, spelled kaf, nun, samach, yud, hey, breaks out into two words. Kenes, Yah. Yah is Hashem, Yud K is Hashem's name. So it becomes a gathering with Hashem being present. So now, because you have Hashem present, who wouldn't want Hashem on their team? I mean, come on. Yeah, it's like unlike me, who was always the last one picked, in football and basketball. I was in high school. I didn't even bother trying out for basketball. I was the statistician. Yeah, I was a statistician. I would write down numbers all through the games. That was a lot of fun. But so I was never a sports guy. That's why I'm a Chicago Cubs fan. They're not a real team. Anyways, so with that kind of a partner, Hashem's your partner. You're not only is it, of course, now L'Shem Shemayim, but now you have an extra ace in the hole. Hashem's there, and that's why it's going to come to a resolution. It's a guarantee that something's going to at least come out of it. Very rarely do discussions that really are for proper, true goal where people are focused on what they're doing just fall apart into complete chaos and fighting and screaming and yelling. When you do have that, it's always because of one reason. It's a three-letter word that's not even English: ego. That's what gets in the way. When a person's ego gets in the way, when they think that their ox is being gored, so to speak, that's when things start to fall apart. When you can leave your ego out, remember, ego means me. It's the I that I am. We all have ego. You have to have some form of ego, otherwise people will walk all over you. But it's what you do if you've got to check that ego at the door. I have seen countless people destroyed because of their ego. Countless. Whether it's a doctor, a rabbi, an accountant, whatever it might be, because they just thought they were God's gift to man. And even though they may have been very good at what they did, you're just too full of yourself. So that's all the positives now that we talked about: the Har Sinai aspect, the gathering aspect, the ego, the common purpose, the unity. Now let's talk about the other half, which we're going to insert now in a moment, the Dor HaPalaga. First, it comes with a little introduction. The introduction is as follows. We all have what is known as Bechira Chofshit, free choice, right? If I want to take this water and spill it on your floor, I wouldn't do it, but I could. No one's making me do that. I have free choice this morning. I had free choice. I could have said, it's raining outside. I'm going to stay in bed the rest of the morning. I'll go to class. I'll go lie down again, which I'm not doing, or go to shul. I have free choice. No one forced me. I went to shul. There's also a point at which Hashem steps in and says, no. And this, you're not going to have free choice. We see many instances in Tanakh where it says clearly that Hashem stepped in to prevent a certain thing from going on. Let's assume, I'll give you a wild example, that someone is about to be killed. But in Hashem's grand plan, that person who's about to be killed is actually going to find the cure for Alzheimer's. It's not going to get killed. Hashem will step in to prevent that from happening. We see that there's a situation where David and Avshalom, his son, are at war, literally. And there was a friend of David who changed his sides to be on Avshalom's side. His name was Achitophel. Now, Achitophel was a very brilliant military strategist. And he gave Avshalom a good idea on how to conquer David. And then somebody else gave an idea instead. And Avshalom took the idea of the other guy. And it says in the Navi, it says that even though Achitophel's ideas were better, Hashem caused him to not accept it, so the rest of the story would proceed. Because Hashem wanted, it says multiple times we see that. So having said that, it's hard to say the next few lines. I'll tell you that, but we have to keep in mind, in general terms, that what I'm about to say is accurate. Rabbi Yochanan Sandlar said that any gathering that's not L'Shem Shemayim is going to fail. It's not going to come to some resolution. Okay, let's see. Let's go to Dor HaPalaga. The Dor HaPalaga, the generation of the flood, who wanted to build a tower and do battle with God. It would seem on the surface that they were really good people, Other than the fact they wanted to kill God or do battle with God, they're really good. It said, "Vayu Aretz Safa Achat Udvarim Achadim," that the world was filled with people. World was how many people were there? They all spoke. They were united. They spoke one language. They had a common goal in building this tower. There were no different races. There was no racism yet. There are no foreign religions. There's no division by country. There's no dispute. It says clearly that they were unified. All their resources were being used for one purpose. They were building this tower. They all had this idea together. So you would think that maybe they would survive. But what happens? The Pasuk says, in the middle of the story, it says, Vayomer Hashem. Hashem said, these people are all one language. And this is what they've begun to do. This is what they're about to do, meaning to build this tower. Now, I'm not going to stop them. Anything they plot to do, go ahead. But then what happens? Because even though they have this achdut, they have this unity, they have this goal, they have this purpose all together, they're missing one key factor, and that is it's not l'shem shamayim. It's not for the sake of heaven. It's exactly the opposite, as a matter of fact. They want to rebel against Hashem. So they're destined for failure from the beginning. God himself at that point, when he says, okay, is it where he sits back and says, go ahead, let's see what you guys can do. Go ahead, I dare you. And they continue and continue. We're doing so great. And then he intervenes. He intervenes by saying, this is not going to happen. It's not going to end well for you. And what does he do? He mixes up their languages. And Rashi tells us that we have one guy up high saying, one guy down below says, throw down some mortar. And he thought he said, throw down a big brick, and he throws it down and gets killed by the brick hitting him in the head. So, but let's imagine the members of the generation for a second. They stood in awe of the fact they're all so united. Imagine all Am Yisrael completely, they weren't Jews yet, but they're all united. They're pooling all their resources for a common goal. They all believe there's no power that they couldn't break, that could break that unity. And we could go up against the whole world. But then they'd be very confused at the same time if you're like an observer watching this. It seems that it's not for good purpose. They're all unit. There's this whole unity. Imagine for a moment, let's just take the extreme example. You don't hear too much about them anymore. Baruch Hashem, the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. Okay, they gather together. They got their white sheets, and they got their torches, and they got their burning crosses. They're unified. They are such unity. They have their hatred for the blacks and the Jews and the gays and whatever else it might be, and they're unified. But again, it's unified for a terrible purpose. We can easily think of mass organizations, movements that were embraced around the world. Like right now, let's like hate the Jews. It's like an organized, and I mean a literally organized movement around the world. At first, some of these movements, whether it was communism or anti-Semitism or whatever, it sweeps up the masses. People get all caught up in this. And then all of a sudden, without achieving any of their goals, something happens. Internal quarrels, problems, money seems to disappear, a loss of direction. You see this a lot. And you see this in the classic examples. I'm sure you've all seen some comments like, Israel's here still. And, where's the ancient Egypt? Where's ancient Rome? Where's this? And where's all the ancient this and all the ancient that? They all felt, how? If Egypt, in its time, the time of the Torah, was the equivalent of Russia or the United States today. World power. They were the world power. Why was it that Hashem says in the Torah, you cannot go back to Egypt? Not just because we were slaves there, but because that was the world's supplier of horses. And they wanted to get the best horses and be connected to Egypt. They were supposedly the best breeders of horses on the earth at the time. But again, what happened over time? Why aren't they in power today? Right? Why is Egypt not the world's big power? Again, internal struggles, power struggles, money, corruption, whatever it might be, and they fall apart. Along comes the next one. But who's still here? With all of our problems and all of our failures and all of it, what's the difference? And even though we don't really have great achdut, We don't. We know that. Only when it's really bad, that's when all of a sudden everyone comes together. But what do we have? That we have is that Hashem's at our side. He's at the table, and we have it's L'Shem Shamayim. Everyone, no one's, with very few exception, is out to destroy the Jewish people among the Jewish people. And yes, we have crazies. Of course we do. I'm not talking about Zionism. I'm not talking about the state of Israel. I'm talking about the Jewish people. Wherever you're going to go, you're going to find crazies. But therefore, the gathering for the sake of heaven is about building. It's not about destroying. And even though it sounds like what the people of the generation of the flood were trying to do was to build, their goal was not to build. The building of the tower was not to build a tower. That wasn't its goal. The goal was destruction, to do war, to do battle with God. There's a sefer called Akedat Yitzchak. It's written by a man named Yitzchak Araba. I think he was in the 1600s. I don't remember for sure. And he looks a little bit differently at this particular Mishnah. According to him, the purpose of the gathering that we're talking about this Mishnah is to preserve what already exists and to add another layer on to what's been built. What does that mean? He says as follows. As opposed to how we've been understanding it this whole time, that people gather together for a specific purpose of building something, he says no. He says what we're talking, what this Mishnah really does refer to is building on top of what we already have, and by doing so, he says if your goal is it's a school, it's a shul, it's a community organization, it's a family, it's a gemach, whatever it might be, that when you want to improve on it, it's going to succeed. You want to grow on that, it's going to succeed. He said, in a sense, the undercurrent of what he's saying is that it's not necessarily true that people get together, even L'Shem Shamayim, that they're going to come to a resolution. They're going to, they decide to build some institution. For sure it's going to happen. So it's very hard to say something like that. He says that this Mishnah of Yochanan Sanplar is really referring to a situation where there is something exists and people want to add to it. Okay, I am going to stop here and we will, Bezrat Hashem, continue after Pesach. And we'll go to the next Mishnah right after Pesach. Bezrat Hashem. Yes?
On your last point.
Yes.
So why would it fail for this?
So the Tower of Babel?
Yeah. Well, what's this?
Because they're not building on top. I mean, you're talking about the people that are Palaga, the ones who built the tower. Why would they fail?
Yeah, no. The last person.
Rabbi Yitzchak Rama said, right. He says it's about something that already exists, and they're gathering together to improve it, to make it grow even bigger. That's what he says.
Okay.
Is that
why would that not?
It would not fail. He's saying would not fail because he's explaining that when you are doing something to build on something that already exists,
right,
and you're unified and all these other things, then you're almost guaranteed success because Hashem's on your side. If you're gathering together to not L'Shem Shamayim, is a different category now. He's saying that's not doing something even based on something that exists.
About building on something that exists already, as opposed to
in the first part of his statement, yes, of Mishnah, yes. Okay, very good. All right. Have a good day. Have a good Shabbat Shalom.